Yeah, good morning, Excellencies. Shall we start our meeting this morning? Thank you. Yeah, well, as you are well aware, this is our probably our final session, session 7. And it's about charging an incentives-based graduation framework to ensure soft landing and achieve resilient, inclusive, and sustainable progress beyond graduation. So today we have with us our keynote speaker, and of course, 4 panelists, distinguished panelists with us today. So we will be listening to them. But first of all, let's give the floor right now to the director of the UN OHRLLS, Mr. Roland Morales, to introduce or give his statement for our session this morning. Mr. Morales, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning to all of you, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's so good to see you again. It has really been a pleasure to be here with all of you this week and to listen to the excellent interventions and discussions that have taken place this week. As it says here, I will be talking about incentive-based graduation. And if we talk about that, and we did that quite a bit this week, some speakers already mentioned earlier this week that the LDC category was established by the General Assembly in 1971. This category was created as a result of the acknowledgement of the international community that special international support measures were needed to assist the LDCs, the least developed among developing countries, to address their structural impediments to growth. At that time, with initially 25 countries, the creation of the LDC category represented a collective global effort to level the playing field for newly independent and structurally disadvantaged developing nations. It is important to note here that the creation of the category was a joint collective global effort to level the playing field for newly independent and structurally disadvantaged developing nations. It's also important to note here that the creation of that category was a joint undertaking between developed and developing countries, driven by a shared vision of having a world without LDCs by the end of last century, the 20th century. However, fast forwarding towards the end of the 20th century, contrary to those expectations at the time, the number of LDCs has doubled or had doubled. It took several decades for the first country to graduate. Today, 14 countries are at various stages of their graduation process, signaling an unprecedented and renewed global opportunity towards achieving the development goals of this group of countries. As much as it was in 1971, today there's still the critically important element of collective responsibility. The international community must ensure that the upcoming graduating countries set a strong example for others to follow and to look forward to. In other words, the success of LDCs in meeting graduation criteria is also a success for development partners who have supported them throughout their long development journey. And that is also why post-graduation support is so important. Development partners have the responsibility to support these countries to the last mile and beyond. Ensuring the continuation of support from developed partners after graduation provides, therefore, predictability and reassurance for graduating countries, And it's also an incentive for the current non-graduating LDCs to pursue graduation confidently, knowing they will not be abandoned once they meet the criteria. I go to the next slide. So today in my presentation of this morning, I would like to unpack the types of support for smooth transition and take you through 4 pathways of support measures towards sustainable, irreversible, and incentivize graduation. The first is about extending existing international support measures. Sorry, I have to go back on. This pathway is based on the 2 well-known General Assembly resolutions on smooth transition, which came out in 2004 and 2012, both underscoring the need to avoid a sharp decline in ODA and technical assistance to graduated LDCs and calling for development and trading partners to adopt a flexible, supportive, and demand-driven approach to smooth transition. The international support measures we are referring to here are those existing measures currently offered and quite a bit talked about over the past couple of days, offered by development and trading partners. The first one, the changes in development, cooperation and financing, it is often said that belonging or not to the LDC category is not always by itself the only or the main criterion for the allocation of most development assistance. But as was mentioned earlier this week, graduating and graduated countries may be faced with multiple transitions from, for instance, the World Bank IDA and from the OECD DAC members. The second broad category of existing international support measures is related to duty-free and quota-free market access preferences with, as we also discussed this week, the best-known Everything But Arms initiative, providing an additional 3 years extension after graduation. And the third category relates to LDC-specific UN support, with some offering a gradual phasing out, such as under, as we heard this week, the Tech Bank, but also the UN CDF and the UN FCCC on climate. Even though all these ISMs are not always used by LDCs, including those in the graduation pipeline for reasons of lack of productive capacity or human resource constraints, there is widespread consensus that these ISMs must not be withdrawn abruptly after graduation. In the next slides, I will take you through the second pathway, and this pathway is about the creation of new support for graduating and graduated countries. As we heard over the past 2 days, there's a need to acknowledge post-graduation challenges, recognizing that vulnerabilities often persist after graduation. There is, therefore, a need to create new support measures to continue support to graduated countries, and we heard proposals from several participants. With respect to that first category, the concessional financing, it is important to recall that following the Sevilla commitment from just a few months ago and the OECD DAC decision to strengthen the ODA graduation process, work is now being undertaken by the OECD to enhance support from its members for countries graduating from LDC status to prevent disruptions in their development trajectories. This includes making efforts to avoid abrupt reductions in both concessional and non-concessional official finance, and to mobilize alternative sources of financing. And as discussed during yesterday's thematic session on trade, there's also a need for new offers for new DFQF market access measures beyond the 3 years now covered by some of the LDC-specific preference schemes. And as we learned, one such example is the new preference scheme of the United Kingdom. I will not repeat here the other very relevant points made during that session by several participants in support of new trade-related transition measures, including those related to aid for trade, the WTO special but differential treatment provisions and waivers, including the TRIP waivers, and the need for rules of origin changes and trade-related technical assistance beyond graduation. A third and last example regarding these type of new measures beyond graduation is in the area of climate change, and here steps can be taken to support graduating and graduated countries beyond the LDC-specific climate fund of the UNFCCC. The third pathway is about support under the Doha Program of Action. Sorry, I have to go back. The Doha Program of Action repeated that graduation should not only be sustainable and should not reverse a country's development progress, but it should also be incentive-based. Among the 3 targets related to graduation, the DPOA has one very clear target focusing on this element. The rationale behind incentivized graduation is that graduation is often treated, as we discussed, as a withdrawal of support with the possibility that it risks creating anxiety towards graduation and the fear of falling back. The DPOA seeks, therefore, to address this by calling for incentivized graduation, one that rewards progress through predictable, additional, and targeted support, proposing measures such as legal assistance to negotiate market access after trade preferences that are granted on the basis of LDCs are withdrawn. And another example, the availability of credit ratings and risk management measures, and many other proposals that were made in that program of action. In addition to these measures listed in the DPOA, I would like here also to add a proposal for the use of an incentive model based on another Doha declaration, and this one being of the WTO ministerial about 25 years ago, which came out to reaffirm the commitment of developed country members to provide incentives to their enterprises and institutions to promote and encourage technology transfer to LDCs, as the well-known Article 66.2 on TRIPS. Translating this kind of incentive model to graduating and graduated LDCs could result in incentive programs from development partners. For instance, to send experts to graduating and graduated LDCs to provide technical assistance. Secondly, to provide funding and joint research, supporting collaborative projects that build capacity in preparation and preparing for graduation, and transfer of expertise to ensure resilient graduation. And lastly, to provide tax incentives, offering such tax breaks to businesses in development partner countries that start new business activities in graduating and graduated countries as a potential method to encourage new investments and economic activities in these countries. As part of such incentives model, the reporting and monitoring of graduation incentives from these bilateral partners could be undertaken by OHR LLS, asking the partners to submit annual reports detailing the incentives they provide. One additional element to mention about the DPOA is, as we heard earlier this week, is that as part of the 5 deliverables and the operationalization of already some of them, graduated countries will continue to benefit from these deliverables for at least 5 years after graduation. And that brings me to the last pathway that I set up here today under the 4th pathway and final one. The focus is on the design of support measures aligned with each graduated country's unique structural vulnerabilities, economic structure, and national priorities. These could include, for instance, to just name a few, sector-specific support, climate and environmental resilience programs, and measures to strengthen productive capacities and diversification. We in OHRS envision that such targeted support will be delivered through the IGRAD Graduation Support Facility. And let me show that in the next slide to you with a bit more detail. IGRAD is one of the deliverables under the DPOA, as we just saw, and it is a global program of support for advisory and capacity building services, as well as a repository and clearinghouse of initiatives and projects pursued in support of these countries. As you can see from the slide, the IGRAD facility has 6 service offering lines, ranging from addressing the loss of existing international support measures, improving the ability of graduating and graduated countries to access non-LDC specific support, the preparation and implementation of smooth transition strategies, assistance in accessing financing transition and beyond, South-South collaboration, as well as ensuring effective participation of graduating and graduated LDCs in the monitoring process of the CDP. Here it is important to note that the process to access the IGRAD services includes a formal demand-driven request of a graduating and graduated country. And just to refer to some of the output mentioned this week, under the umbrella of the OHRS-led Interagency Task Force on Graduation, in collaboration with other entities, this facility includes the coordination, preparation, and support to implementation for assessments such as the readiness assessment, and also, as was mentioned yesterday by Tess, the expert, the national productive capacity gap assessments that are being prepared by UNCTAD. A central message of key importance, to me at least, is that IGRAD was established to coordinate support from partners so as to function as one UN, creating efficiency, coordination, and avoiding duplication. The main partners that work with us in the implementation of IGRAD are with us today: UNIDO, ECA, DESA, and the UN Tech Bank, and with them many other entities listed on this slide, including the critically important role of also the resident coordinator offices for coordinating the implementation of IGRAD's service offering lines on the ground. This slide also gives you a brief overview of the various countries that already benefited from the various services provided under this facility. And that leads me to my concluding slide. If you allow me to reiterate that sustainable and irreversible graduation is a shared achievement between LDCs and their development partners. Effective post-graduation support is, on the one hand, essential for protecting development gains of graduating and graduated countries, but also it should also set an example and be an incentive mechanism that encourages other LDCs. In short, and to sum up, with continuity, predictability, and tailored support, we will have an international community that helps to build a future where more countries graduate and stay out of the LDC category. Thank you very much, and back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Dr. Morales, for your very comprehensive and informative remarks. I won't make any comment at this point, but now we turn our focus to our panelists. Before I give them the opportunity, let me just quickly introduce in the following. First, after this, we will have Mr. Amrit Rai, the Foreign Secretary from Nepal, and followed on by Ms. Jutta Upilainen, the former EU Commissioner, And then we'll have Her Excellency Ms. Nahida Sobhan, yep, permanent representative, Mission of Bangladesh to the UN Office and the International Organization in Geneva. And then finally, we will have distinguished speaker, Sheikh Haya Abdurrahman Al Thani, yeah, sorry, the Deputy Director General for Planning, Qatar Fund for Development. So those will be our distinguished panelists for this session. So may I now invite Mr. Rai to make his intervention and in response to the following two questions. One, how can the architecture of international support be tailored so that incentive-based measures align more closely with national priorities, reward sustained reform and resilience, and ensure that no country faces a graduation cliff or abrupt loss of development momentum? Second question is, what best practices, mechanisms, and tools, such as the IGRAD facility, solutions for transitioning from LDC-specific market access, extended ODA eligibility, technical, legal assistance, and risk mitigation instruments can be scaled up to ensure a smooth, sustainable transition for graduating LDCs? Those are the questions for you, Mr. Rai. I give you the floor. Thank you. 10 minutes. You'll be allowed 10 minutes. Thank you so much.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Honorable ministers, I also recognize the presence of the President of the United Nations Economic and Social Council, fellow panelists, distinguished delegates. Let me delve into the first question, how can an incentive-based graduation framework? So on this question, the graduation from LDC status should be taken as a temporal continuum. And graduation is not a binary state change, but it is a phased trajectory from the LDC status, which still needs support mechanism to prevent post-graduation regression. And the graduation is a milestone towards sustainable development and progress, signifying a march ahead in structural, institutional, and human capital domains. An incentive-based graduation framework should first address and minimize the disincentives. And let me unpack this by zooming into what such disincentives could be. First, the biggest disincentive is sudden shock caused by the loss of preference that LDCs receive. And these shocks may include, among others, abrupt impact on trade access due to erosion of preferential trade treatment on tariffs, quotas, special rules of origin. And there will be more stringent IP regime after graduation. And similarly, there will be loss or reduction of LDC-specific concessional financing and support. And second, the possible discrepancy between the graduation indicators and ground realities is another disincentive. The graduation criteria for the LDCs are predominantly predicated upon aggregate quantitative indicators such as GNI per capita, EVI, and Human Assets Index. While these indicators are useful for overall assessment, they may not fully reflect subnational, sectoral, and population-specific vulnerability. As a result, a country may meet fully the graduation criteria on paper, while significant gaps remain on the ground. And this possibility of indicator reality divergence can disincentivize LDC's readiness to graduate. And third, the need to negotiate transition measures on case-by-case basis is another deterrent. So what can we do to design an incentive-based graduation framework? So having understood the key incentives, we now are in a better position to talk of contours of incentive-based graduation. First, the graduation must be treated as a temporal continuum rather than a sudden binary juncture. And the UN Secretary General once rightly said, graduation must be a reward, never a punishment. And LDC-specific incentives need to taper gradually rather than ending abruptly. So it is important that we reduce exposures to shocks and reinforce development gains. And particularly, the tariff concessions and quota access for critical sectors should continue on a phased basis. Second, the data and analysis around graduation should be more robust and rigorous, with enough granular details. And this will give the LDCs a clearer picture before they proceed for graduation. And it is also an important factor in the sudden shocks and their impact on key graduation indicators. Let me go to the second question. What best practices, mechanisms, and tools can be scaled up to ensure a smooth, sustainable transition for graduating LDCs? As we deliberate to chart pathways for smooth, inclusive, and sustainable graduation, we must be clear. Graduation should not be another edition of turbulence, but a proud journey towards prosperous society and sustainable development. And let me highlight some best practices, mechanisms, and tools that can be scaled up to ensure smooth, sustainable transitions for graduating and graduated LDCs. First, we must scale up integrated support facilities, such as we have iGrad now, iGrad facility, and they help provide tailored technical and legal assistance, advisory support for trade transition, and contingency financing during shocks, and exchange of policy learnings across regions. And operationalizing sustainable graduation supply facility is indispensable to provide integrated technical assistance, tailored capacity building, and targeted financial as well as policy support to graduating and graduated LDCs. And it is equally important to ensure that the facility is adequately financed and resourced. Second, leverage the graduation support programs from wider United Nations system. For example, UNCTAD's graduation support program that was recently agreed in Geneva can be leveraged, and it can contribute by providing structured guidance on productive capacity, industrial upgrading, and trade diversification. Third, the scaling of financing. Many of our efforts ultimately hinge on the availability of finance. Therefore, it is important to pool resources from multilateral development banks, bilateral partners, and private investors into transition-focused funds. And keeping the safeguard against shocks in mind, contingent credit lines and guarantees to protect LDCs can be developed and automated triggers to release funds during the crisis. So these are some of the thoughts that, Chairman, you put the two questions on me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rai. Now we move on to our next panelist, Ms. Jutta Uplalainen. Your question will be, how can an incentives-based graduation framework linking demand-driven support, extended trade preferences and concessional blended finance be designed to consolidate inclusive development gains and prevent reversals post-graduation. Now invite Ms. Ubilainen for her intervention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Good morning, Your Excellencies. I have to say that it is a great pleasure, and also honor, to address this high-level meeting today. First, I want to thank Qatar for hosting this high-level meeting and event, as well as the LDC conference in 2023, which I attended as the European Commissioner for International Partnerships. So I still have very warm memories from that very important conference. And I have to say that, unfortunately, uncertainty has increased since the conference. But the Doha program of action adopted at the conference remains very relevant. The aim is sustainable development and a future for all countries, including those with the greatest development challenges. And I'm a little bit sorry for the current political discourse, because if you follow the news, not only from Europe, but I would say all across the world, the main political narrative at the moment is very much focusing on security, hard security, and military expenditure and defense. Very few politicians are talking about sustainable development goals anymore, or Agenda 2030. And I think also from that perspective, it is so important to have meetings like this, where we can really focus on sustainable future and discuss that how we can support the least developed countries in their future development path. As Commissioner responsible for development cooperation, I very often actually encountered the question of how to motivate and encourage LDCs to graduate. And I believe that every country wants to develop and move forward in development. But the question is more about how to do it in a controlled manner and in a way that makes positive progress sustainable. And from this perspective, I would like to highlight 3 things that I think are relevant when we talk about the LDC's graduation. And the first one is education. There are more young people in the world today than ever before in our history. If we look at the LDCs, the great majority of the population in these countries are young people who really dream of a better life than their parents had. As a commissioner, I increased the share of education in EU's development cooperation funds from 6% to 13%. So I over doubled our share of education. I am a former teacher, but I'm also a former finance minister. And I know that education is an investment, not just an expense. So investing in education returns many times over the society. We have also seen this firsthand in Finland, my own home country. Finland has risen from a poor agriculture country to one of the most competitive countries in the world precisely by investing in education. The education of all its citizens. And that's why I believe that raising the level of education and skills is key in LDCs as well. And actually this also relates to my second message, namely increasing private investments in LDCs. The global development challenges are so huge that we cannot meet them with public development finance alone. We need more public-private cooperation and private investments in developing countries. It is important that companies respect high-quality standards, both ecological and social, and this was also the starting point for the Global Gateway strategy that I prepared for the European Union in 2021. And that strategy aimed to mobilize investments worth of 300 billion euros by 2027. And actually that target has already been exceeded. So the Global Gateway strategy utilizes public development finance to mobilize private investment. Both blended finance and guarantees are used. So the aim is to encourage companies to invest in developing countries. So I think that we should use the ODA in a strategic way to leverage private capital and strengthening domestic resource mobilization. Of course, developing countries are responsible for their own development finance, and developed countries are responsible for supporting them. Domestic resources mobilization, in particular taxation, is the most sustainable source of financing for SDGs. So tax revenue allows countries to provide necessary public services such as education, health services, and infrastructure to their citizens. And I see a lot of potential also in LDCs in terms of domestic resource mobilization. As Commissioner, I spoke with European countries, but also European companies in all 27 EU member states. And I very often ask the companies that how could they invest more in the least developed countries? What should we do in order to motivate, incentivize, encourage them to invest more in the least developed countries? And their answers very often revolved around a few things. First, a skilled workforce, in this case, in investment in education. The second one was predictability and trust in society. So in other words, political risk. So in order to attract investments, it is therefore important to ensure a good governance, reduce corruption, and increase transparency. This actually leads to my third point about the use of technology. Digitalization and technological developments offer opportunities to create more economic growth and jobs, but also to increase openness and good governance in developing countries as well. And this in turn increases trust both within society and among different actors, as well as in the direction of partners. Therefore, establishing a technology bank is a good thing, and I truly believe that it can help to bridge the digitalization gap and also transfer technology. But confidence is also increased by the knowledge that once a country has graduated from the LDC category, it will not immediately lose all its benefits. And therefore we need to develop smooth transition strategies and tailor each country's own path forward in development. In this work, the further development of a sustainable graduation facility is so important. So, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, finally, I really want to thank you, Undersecretary General Rabab Fatima, for your very important work in, I would say, protecting, but also very much promoting the interests of LDC in this current political agenda. Ultimately, it is about political choices in developing countries as well as developed countries. If we want to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals everywhere in the world, we have money. We have the money, we have the financial resources to do it. But do we have enough political will? I think that's mainly the question. And I personally, I want to believe that we do. But I think we need to have a clear and strong movement in order to pay more attention to this important topic also globally. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much, Ms. Uppilainen, for your very useful intervention. Very important points that you mentioned there. Thank you so much. Now we move to the next speaker, Her Excellency, Ms. Sobhan. Well, there is no particular question for you, but I understand you will be speaking on the topic we are discussing at the moment. I give you the floor, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Very good morning to all of you, and assalamu alaikum. At the very beginning, I would like to echo my other panelists in thanking the government of Qatar, and particularly the Qatar Foundation, for giving us this platform to talk about the very important topic of our lives, not just for our countries, because it reaches to all the other citizens of the countries that we are talking about. Secondly, I must also thank the leadership of UNOHR-LLS, and particularly the Undersecretary General for the personal interest and leadership that he has taken, as just mentioned by my previous speaker, in promoting and protecting the LDCs. And I must applaud and appreciate one more point here for the organizers, because I have been watching and observing in last 2-3 days the bringing in the gender perspective in all the sessions, having at least one woman panelist in all the sessions, and particularly I'm very glad to be here in this panel with two very distinguished women champions in this session. So I must thank the organizers for that as well. Now, as we talk about the incentives-based graduation framework, we can see easily that it is actually already embedded in the LDC 5 Doha Program of Action, particularly in Article 276, which mentions that it is to improve, that the countries have agreed and recognized the need to improve the scope and use of smooth transition measures and incentives for all graduating LDCs. And also, I heard the keynote speaker, Mr. Mollard, where he has mentioned the 4 pathways, and thereby he has taken out 50% of what I wanted to say. So I will not be, I will not be repeating those, but I would like to focus on some particular areas. Graduation is not the end of the story for the LDCs. It is the last part of the introductory chapter, as I see it. I would like to focus on 3 areas: the national or the domestic sector, then the United Nations and its role, and thirdly, the global partnership. Now, to begin with the national and the domestic sector, I think it is like putting the house in order first. And here I would like to refer from the speakers that we have been hearing in last 2 days. As Mr. Teshfashu mentioned the other day, that he emphasized on the structural transformation and the productive capacity, and I think this is something that we need to look into. And in a similar vein, we also heard the Honorable Special Assistant of Bangladesh, Dr. Anisuzzaman Chowdhury, when he mentioned about the policy shift, the importance of policy shift in a country to create the space and momentum for the graduation, and that gives the foundation for sustainability, how we do that. That's how we materialize it, one thing. And I also heard the Director General of Qatar Foundation who mentioned about the private sector, and this is echoed very strongly by our panelists today, Ms. Zuta Urpilainen. What we realize is the private sector is a very important and key player or partner that we often tend to forget. A country cannot develop without the development of the capacity of the private sector. So we need to look into that as well. And lastly, in the domestic sector, I would say one very important thing to make the graduation and the transition sustainable is effective coordination within the government machineries, and also effective coordination between government, private sector, and the UN country team. I think that is very important for sustainability of the graduation. And lastly, to make one we have the leap of faith and graduate, to make it sustainable, what we do beforehand, that is readiness. I think readiness is optimum to make it, readiness should be optimum to make the graduation sustainable. And in that regard, the end outcome cannot be forced. Now, in my second focus, I would like to focus on the UN and its how it can contribute. Now, firstly, I believe that the UN 80 Initiative Action Plan should have a clear and very strong focus to support the graduation STCs. That's one thing. And in that regard, I believe that the OHRLLS mandate to lead the interagency task force has to be strengthened. I mean the IATF. So the lead of OHRLLS in IATF has to be strengthened. And we want full operationalization of IGRAD. And the effective implementation of the 6 souls has to be strengthened and embedded in the work of the action plan. Now, thirdly, I would like to also mention the United Nations UNGA's second committee resolution, which has just been passed in the second committee, A/AC.280L48, that has clearly given another mandate for one open-ended working group of states. And also, this resolution is emphasizing on integrating the words like the previous resolutions and other documents and action plans, and put these words into actions, and that's what we need to do, and that's where we need to focus. So we have a lot of things already done, which is in the paper, which is in the Doha Program of Action and the resolutions, UN resolutions, second committee resolutions. We need to put the words into action. Now, lastly, I will focus on the global partnership. No country cannot develop alone. And for the LDCs are faced with multifaceted, multi-layered challenges. So it cannot sustain the graduation without the global partnership, without the support of their development partners, their trading partners. And the LDCs are more vulnerable than other countries vulnerable to external shocks that are higher on, the impacts of external shocks are higher on LDCs. And they have higher stakes on those graduating or are already graduated, because the challenges are multifaceted. And here, the key to success in sustainability, sustainable graduation is hidden in the transition period. So therefore, I go back to the Doha Program of Action, particularly Article 277 and 278, that has already recognized that development and trading partners should continue their support to avoid abrupt reduction in ODA, SNDT, and other ISMS. Secondly, the importance of phasing out transition period, and due to the external shocks and fragmentation of the current global fragmentation in the global trading regime, it has given a lot of space where we need to give the support for this transition to the LDCs that are graduating, and also for those who have just graduated. And among these, also we cannot forget one thing when we talk about partnership. We cannot forget the SDG 17, which has laid down very important platforms for a global partnership. We need to implement those. And also in the WTO agreement, it is already there. We just need to implement those, which is by the global partners and the development and trading partners, like the DFQF, market access, IFDs, and access to digital market. And there are other areas. I don't want to be repetitive, so I will leave it there. As I conclude, I would also like to refer, going back to what the WTO DDG mentioned in the opening day. The WTO DDG mentioned that the LDCs has to understand what is doable. I would rather say we should perhaps take actions for enabling the doers. And that is where the partnership and shared and collective responsibility comes in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Swapna. I agree absolutely with you that without relevant partners, it would be difficult for countries to sustain their after graduation. So thank you very much. Now we turn to our final and the speaker, Sheikha Haya Abdurrahman Al-Thani, Deputy Director of Planning. The question for you is, which institutional policy and partnership arrangements are most effective in reinforcing domestic resource mobilization, building productive and adaptive capacity, and addressing persistent vulnerabilities in the face of ongoing shocks? I give you the floor.
Thank you, Excellency, Mr. Chair. Excellencies, thank you very much, first of all, for the opportunity to speak. And I have to, preface my intervention by saying that I had notes jotted down, but they're all now null and void because of the intervention of Her Excellency the Ambassador. She mapped out quite precisely how things should be done, and the policies and the integration of policies and the steps that required, but also giving us a retrospective on past experiences and the setbacks. So if you allow me to address the question directed to me, but also integrate what we believe in Qatar is quite vital and important. Because to avoid speaking in sweeping generalities, but countries in this region of the world, in the South generally, do understand that there is a collective need for support and for growth. And we understand that the success of one country in our region is the success of others. And most citizens understand this intrinsically, most citizens of the world, but specifically I would say in our region and beyond that, is that we rise and we fall with our country. And we take that very, very, I would say, we take that to heart and we translate that into our policies. And countries such as Qatar didn't go through natural transitions of graduation, others have. And there is a lot of variety when it comes to transitions and graduations. You know, it's not a linear process, and there are backsliding. And the issue at hand is that we talk about policies to prevent backsliding, but we must also talk about, you know, the soft elements and components of that, which is if there are increases of backsliding, there has to be compassion, there has to be empathy, but also safe measures in which, you know, a backslide doesn't have to mean complete abandonment of the process itself. And how Qatar addresses that is that most of our support, if not all our support to LDC's countries, is in support of their graduation track. So our support of the educational sector, even humanitarian assistance in times of crisis, is our support for the growth, for the stability, for the security of the country, in which they are able to then stand on their own 2 feet and be able to walk towards graduation. And the word graduation is quite deceptive because obviously graduation is a celebratory event and case, and it is quite an important moment to celebrate. But also post-graduation, and anyone who has graduated any type of educational institution or the like knows that the day after graduation, fears, responsibilities overwhelm. And what we talk about here, we talk about policies and procedures that are put and embedded in place to support those countries to lessen those fears. But regressing post-graduation for humans and for countries is quite similar. You know, there is times in which countries regress, people regress in their careers, in their lives, and having stable countries, having opportunities for the mobilization of resources towards uplifting people is important even in the context of graduation. How Qatar has addressed the issue of graduation and support of LDCs is that we approach development holistically. We believe that there are components of development that are important to embed in the realm of grants, in the world of, you know, direct support, but also aiding in the policy and the access to innovative financing and mechanisms that allow countries to take governance and take control of their own resources and have access to those platforms are quite important. But what we, you know, our opening speaker spoke to us quite eloquently about Seville and the policies that were issued out of the Seville FFD. And Qatar actually hosted FFD2, I believe, in its recent history. And we saw policies coming out of the financing for development. And usually what those financing policies come out is a reflection of the backdrop of the, you know, current situation. So we saw in Doha, for example, the FFD2, it was quite sobering. There was a backdrop of a financial crisis happening around 2006, 2007. And so the policies reflected were quite restrained. And then we saw sort of the splurge of this spur of optimism with the quadruple A recommendation that came out. And now in Seville, we saw very much a retraction and sort of that sobering language coming back into effect. And that swinging of the pendulum that we constantly see in policies in which whatever financial or economic or socioeconomic geopolitical issues happening around the world then translate into the policies that are being pushed. And what Qatar tries to maintain throughout is consistency in policy. Optimism must be maintained to allow countries to have that hopeful outlook to things. And you know, we believe that the private sector, as Your Excellency Ambassador, you outlined, but also the public sphere, governments, ownership, you know, centralizing ownership of graduation process with the government itself, having them being the architects of their own future is important. And then where we see Qatar coming in is the integration of our support within the frameworks of the national strategies and plans. And that sort of interactive approach of things is what allows Qatar to best position itself as an ally, as a supporter of graduation, and as a supporter of LDCs around the world. And I'll leave it here, Your Excellency. And thank you very much again. You know, Doha Program of Action carries our beloved city in its name, and the success of Doha Program of Action is, we believe, the success of everyone. And so we look forward to progressing our role in it. And the way that we have done that and we have integrated that into the Doha Program of Action is that we approached it into this tier approach. We supported first and foremost programs that are resilience building through the resilience building track. We also supported stockholding and stockpiling and, you know, the mobilization of resources. And now we're talking and we're in advanced discussions on the iGrad and graduation track. And so this tiered approach allows us to interact in a sustainable and a meaningful way, and in a way that allows for long-term impact. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sheikh Altani, for your very useful comments. Yeah, and thank you also for having us here in your beautiful country, especially in Doha. I was telling you in the beginning, all these nights we've been, my first time to Qatar as well, and we've been driving around just to watch all the beautiful lights around the city. So, but thank you very much for having us in your beautiful city. Yeah, well, Excellencies, that brings us to the end of our panelists. Now it's time for to open up the floor for any comments and questions that you may have. I think we are having, our time is quite good. The panelists have, the speakers have been very good in with time. So now we're going to open up the floor for any interventions. Please keep to, because we have a bit of time, so I'll allow like 3 minutes each for anyone to make any comments. Anyone? Oh, Angola. Yep. You have the floor.
Mr. Chair, distinguished colleagues, allow me to begin by expressing our appreciations for convening this high-level meeting and for focusing on one of the most consequential dimensions of the Doha Program of Action. Graduation is indeed a milestone, but as the Doha Program of Action itself recognizes, vulnerabilities do not disappear at the moment a country crosses the threshold. Instead, they often intensify, particularly when LDC-specific support schemes are withdrawn without adequate transition measures. This is precisely why the Doha Program of Action calls, most notably in paragraphs 276 and 280 to 285, for a shift towards an incentive-based, predictable, and country-tailored international support architecture. The objective is clear: to ensure that the decade to 2031 delivers not only more graduation, but sustainable and irreversible graduation. We are fully aligned with this vision. Angola strongly supports an incentives-based graduation framework that rewards reform effort and resilience, rather than inadvertently penalizing countries for progressing. This includes extended trade preferences and World Trade Organization transition periods in line with the recent decisions, like the outcome of its 13th Ministerial Conference, M13, concessional and blended finance calibrated to vulnerability profiles, demand-driven technical, legal, and institutional support, and strengthened risk mitigation instruments, especially given escalating climate shocks. In this regard, we welcome the establishment of the Sustainable Graduation Support Facility, IGRADE, one of the key deliverables of the Doha Program of Action, as a crucial platform for integrated diagnosis, capacity building, and resource mobilization. But to meet his expectation, IGRADE scale, predictability, and scope must be significantly expanded, and its 6 service offering lines must be able to respond comprehensively to national needs. Ultimately, no country should confront transition risks alone. A global system that accompanies, supports, and rewards resilience is essential to ensure that graduation becomes a decisive step forward, not a potential step back. An incentive-based approach is not simple, desirable. It is an obligation embedded in the Doha Program of Action and necessary to achieve the promise of sustainable development for all. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Angola. Now I give the floor to Bangladesh.
Thank you, Chair. Once again, I would like to thank the organizers, especially the Government of Qatar, for following up from their very ambitious LDC meeting the last time that we had the LDC 5, and a very innovative Doha Action Program, especially this incentive-based graduation. And what I understand, even from the presentation, that this incentive-based graduation implies continuity of support measures post-graduation. I think this is an important thing that should be reflected in the outcome document as well. With that comment, I thank you again.
Thank you very much, Bangladesh. Can I give the floor to, can you, Bhutan, yeah? You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make some brief intervention. In the interest of time, I will give it short. So firstly, as we were listening to the esteemed speakers, keynote speakers, and other interventions, the important element that is indispensable in implementing a sustainable graduation, or be it sustaining the development gains, I believe, personally feel, is that how do we make everyone believe in the same vision? Now, if we are talking about sustainable graduation, how can we develop this united coalition for intervention or to take actions, be it private sector, be it international development partners, be it other players? How do we make them believe in the vision? And then channelize all the efforts or support measures towards achieving that vision. So in case of Bhutan, keeping this element in mind, what we did in terms of a smooth transition strategy is to integrate that smooth transition strategy into the national development plan, and then channelize all the resources, support measures towards implementing that national development plan. And more than that, what I also feel is that for countries that are pursuing sustainable development, I mean consciously pursuing sustainable development, now when the country, for instance, countries like Bhutan, we consciously pursue sustainable development to our development philosophy of gross national happiness. And after graduation, now some of the LDC-specific support measures, especially with regard to climate, resilience, and adaptation, it phases out. Now, when the country specifically, consciously pursues sustainable development, then there should also be thought on how do we sustain these support measures. It can be from other non-LDC specific measures or from other international fronts, but thought should also be given on how do we incentivize countries to continue pursuing the sustainable development goals, or consciously informing the development trajectory based on international needs and demands. So I think there should also be thoughts, adequate thoughts given on that front. And I will keep this remark short. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bhutan, those very useful remarks. Yeah. Now I give the floor to Finland.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm very pleased to note that also the technology transfers and also the role of the new technology bank was present in this discussion. As a partner country, Finland takes an active role in digital development sector, for example, through Global Gateway initiatives and FinFund's investments. Finland's development finance institution, FinFund, is a forerunner in the digital sector compared to other DFIs in Europe and globally. And it has received EFSD plus guarantees of 100 million euro for digitalization projects in sub-Saharan Africa. FinFund aims to expand and increase its digital portfolio further. We harness our technological expertise to support sustainable development and to promote digital and green transition. As a partner country, we are committed to address the digital divide. Thank you very much, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much, Finland. Any other? Qatar. Yep.
Thank you, distinguished chair and distinguished speakers for a fruitful meeting. I'm Fatma Limhendadi. I'm a monitoring and evaluation researcher at QFFD. And at QFFD, we really value sustainability, impact, and outcomes, and kind of creating longevity, especially in LDCs, kind of aiding in the graduation process as well with the initiatives that QFFD does. My question is how can we ensure that graduating countries can sustain the impact and outcomes of their education, multi-sectorial, and economic development initiatives beyond donor support? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Qatar. Sorry, I can't see you.
Lao PDR.
Claudia, yeah, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
And then followed by you, sir.
I would like to thank the speakers for your very comprehensive contribution, especially for graduating country like Laos. For us, graduation is, of course, an achievement and also a milestone of progress of development of the country. Yet, we are well aware that the path beyond graduation can be very fragile, as we are losing international support measures, as mentioned by distinguished speakers, as well as exposure to market volatility and climate vulnerabilities, which can threaten the hard-won gains, especially for graduation in the first place. Therefore, I would like to stress the importance of continued international support. I think it's still very, very essential for sustainable and resilient graduation, especially, of course, in terms of promoting economic diversification, investing in human capital, strengthening institutions, embracing digital transformation, and also building resilience to challenges such as climate change and global market disruptions. I also wish to stress the importance of regional integration, which is also very important for LDCs. For example, in the LAPDR, actually we predominantly exposed to other Asian countries, which are either part of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations or ASEAN, or have free trade agreements with ASEAN, because ASEAN has signed many free trade agreements with other partners. Therefore, we still think that after graduation, a large share of our country's exports will still continue to be exported duty-free to those destinations, especially ASEAN member states, as well as our partners who have signed the free agreement with ASEAN. And of course, we also think that we still can export duty-free under the most favored nations with many countries in Asia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lao PDR. Gentlemen, sorry, I can't see from here. Can you use the stage where you're from? Thank you.
Hello. Yes, I'm from UNIDO. I'm program officer with the Africa Bureau. I think that we have not discussed the regional integration enough, especially with regards to the STS, who could be also multi-country. We could have an STS, a regional STS, especially when we have corridors that are already engaged, like the Lobito corridor, like the Northern corridor, or cross-border initiatives like Zimbabwe and Zambia, who have a cross-border agro-industrial park. The same for Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire and other regional integration tools, especially if we have regional policies that are put in motion. And through, I think, these mechanisms, we have also the capacity given to countries to not compete in a region. And this is sometimes an impediment and a fragility to shocks when those countries, neighboring countries compete. So maybe we should consider also this in the STS approach on a multi-country basis, especially for irreversible graduation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Unido? You said, this is the stage where you're from. We can't see from here.
Thank you very much, Chair. My name is Tesfacho. I'm a member of the Committee for Development Policy. First of all, thank you very much for presentation this very critical point, resilience. I just want to highlight a point which will reinforce this resilience idea, building on what the keynote speaker, Roland, was saying. I'm glad he reminded us that when the LDC category was first established by GA in 1971, about 25 countries were identified as LDCs, mainly newly independent countries and some vulnerable economies. And the whole idea at that time was to create a level playing field so that these countries could catch up. That was the thinking, catch up with middle-income countries and reach a point where they don't need any international support measures. Not only that the number of LDCs increased to 52 before it came down now to 44, but it took 4 decades for about 2-3 countries to graduate, and the world has changed. Now we have what we call middle income trap, which is that middle income countries are going through difficulties where moving out of the middle income level is becoming very difficult. At this time, expecting LDCs that have met the criteria for graduation to join this middle income trap without thinking in terms of incentives for them to make them bravely join this difficult terrain is really a bit unfair in a way. So I think this is just to reinforce that because the world has changed dramatically from the way it was thought when LDC category was established some 50 years ago. I think it's very important to continuously reinforce to development partners that 1971, it was a collective undertaking. The GA decided, both developed and developing countries, so the success of LDCs is also the success of development partners. I think it should be seen like that. To say that you've reached a certain point, now good luck to you, at this very difficult time is really a failure of development partners as well. That's what the point I would like to highlight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Any other? Yeah, you go ahead, please.
Good morning, Excellencies and distinguished participants. I'm from UN Technology Bank, and I would like to thank you for organizing this excellent event for UNOHLS and Qatar Fund for Development. So the discussions was very helpful and inspiring. And as we reflect on how LDCs can achieve sustainable and resilient graduation, it's clear that science, technology, and innovation must be at the heart of any strategy for resilience development. For LDCs, also STI offers a pathway not only withstand with shocks, but structurally transform their economies and societies. And this is why the UN Technology Bank established as an outcome of Doha Program of Action. So we truly want graduation to be sustainable and irreversible, and STI must move from the margins to the center of national strategies. So UN Technology Bank stands ready to deepen its support and partnerships for LDCs to have the capacities, technologies, and confidence to build a future by resilience and by opportunities. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other? Okay, there seems to be no more comments from the floor. Now we'll give the last opportunity to our panelists, our speakers here for their final comment, maybe 2-3 minutes comments. I think we'll just start from the left here and go right through to the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your questions and comments. And I think I would take only one thing which I would like to comment from my side, and that's the question raised by Bhutan. How can we make a joint vision? I think that is actually a very important question, because we know that, unfortunately, not in the near future, the OECD funding will be increasing. So we know that official development aid will decrease in the near future, or at least it won't increase. And then it is a question that how can we encourage donors who provide ODA funding to work more closely with also the least developed countries, including with the private sector. And I think this idea to create a clear vision for a country is a very good idea. And my advice as a former politician is really to try to create that vision in a very comprehensive way, so that you would be able to consult your different actors in your society, including youth, including business representatives, including civil society, including academia, and everybody should be somehow involved and part of that process. And then, whenever the vision is ready, to communicate it with your partners very openly. And what is important is really to have a clear benchmarks, so that you can say that, okay, the vision is not very long, it can't be very short and precise, but there are clear benchmarks. And then you can also showcase accountability for the donors and your partners, including the private sector. Because this accountability creates more trust and confidence. And through that trust, you can then able to motivate and incentivize and encourage also, I would say, more public and private investments in the LDC countries. So, of course, it is not very easy to make a joint vision for a state. I know that also as a former party leader, but I would really encourage you to start that kind of process and be very open and transparent within that process, because I think it is also important, as I said in my intervention, to engage with young people, because many of you have witnessed in the past few months, years in your own countries, how big power young people actually have at the moment. They are representing the majority in your societies. If they don't have opportunities, if they don't believe in the future, if they don't believe or feel that they belong to your society, they really start to react. And from that point of view, I think this kind of engagement and inclusivity is so important while you are preparing that kind of vision for your state.
Thank you very much, Ms. Abdullahi. Now I invite Sheikh Al-Thani for a final remarks.
Thank you. Very much off of what you just said, you know, the youth demographic is often looked at as an issue. You know, it's a problem to be solved, but if it's looked at as a hopeful and, you know, plentiful resource for governments to rise, there is the answer to our question. You know, what to do is to utilize the capacity of human resources within the country, because at the end of the day, you know, we're all in service of the country and its progress. You know, I'm a government agent, and so it's very difficult for me to gush about my government or the state of this convening without obviously coming out as very biased. But I would say that, you know, attending conferences around the world, there's very few places that provide a platform like the platform provided here, and this is very much to the credit of Your Excellency, you know, USG. Thank you for your partnership. I have to say that we've enjoyed a great partnership with your office under the Doha Program of Action, but also with your leadership. And so thank you for that. Thank you for this convening. We've heard policies, and there's no shortage of recommendations of how to take things and how to progress. It's simply now about translating that into action. And we believe that translating that into action is only done through partnerships. I mean, look at the convening here today, the representation across levels of seniority, across you know, government and private sector, UN agencies and the like. And it is through partnerships that this compatible and holistic approach will be hopefully realized by 2031, or hopefully even, you know, before that. We're quite optimistic, and Qatar is committed towards the Doha Program of Action. It's committed both in action but also in advocacy to advocate for the rights of LDCs, to have a space and a rightful space in the global sphere, and not to be looked at as a problem to be solved, but partners to be engaged with. And we hope to continue our path in doing so.
Thank you very much, Sheikh Al Thani. Yeah, now I give the floor to Mr. Rai.
Thank you, Chair. For 3 days, we were discussing the development trajectory of some of the graduated and the graduating LDCs. What we know from human history is that all countries now which are developed traversed through more or less a linear path for their economic development. They all were traditional society, and they prepared themselves, and they took off to the maturity and as industrialized society they are today. So we are not discussing an alien matter. These LDCs are not alien. They are also a part of this world system. What we are, I think, talking about is the way how we can incentivize those LDCs recently graduated and pipeline in graduation to make their, the graduation or the development trajectory more sustainable, smooth, and irreversible. That is, I think, the discussions that we're making. And do we think that, the underdevelopment or the poverty is a perennial issues of humanity? It's not. We can end it. That is what we are trying to do that. And is 1 billion populations living in LDCs predestined to live in perennial poverty or the destitution? No, it's not. That's why we are making all-out effort with our partners to end that situation. And of course, Doha Program of Action is a blueprint for our transitions, for our development trajectory. That is why we are on our march. So you can see that countries are coming for graduation. That means they are moving towards taking off and moving towards maturity, strengthening their institutional capacity, building productivity, and improving their governance system. And during that transition, we've discussed that abrupt ending of preferential treatment would be difficult. So we are saying that, of course, we got a 3-year automated continuation of preferential treatment. And I think the LDCs are in view. We need a little more extension of that preferential treatment, during which we'll be able to strengthen ourselves and stand on our own feet and compete in this competitive market arena, so we will sustain our development. And there is no other way than the enhanced partnership. Now the danger is there is technology. And in the past, every country took a similar path, linear path, when there was no such advanced technology. But we can see the rapid development of technology, and the technology can be utilized for leapfrogging of development. There's no necessary that we can also create the same path, but we can leapfrog. But the problem is that if there is more technology, let's say the divide between rich and poor and among and within the society, then that will endanger LDCs will be left farther behind. So I think we really have to think how we can utilize modern technology, including AI, to leapfrog our development. These are some of my thoughts. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rai. Ambassador, you have the floor now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, if I can compare the situation of graduation and the transition period, why we are talking so much about the transition period and the need and emphasizing on the need to get the support. You remember our children, when they start walking, with their first step of a child, we don't let them walk alone. We keep the supports in their back on the side so that they don't fall down until they start running. So that's where the transition period comes in for the LDCs. I'm very glad to hear the delegation of Finland for their commitment to work on decreasing the digital divide. I think that is very important, particularly also for the LDCs, and also in their pathway to graduate. And here I think we need to also combine with it enabling the capacity, for allowing them with the ability to get access to e-commerce as well. And this is something that needs to be included in the global shared and collective responsibility as well, because that is something that is new we are talking about. We are talking about the fourth industrial revolution. So the activities, global activities, the support mechanisms need to address that as well. And lastly, on the question made by our colleague, distinguished delegation of Bhutan, I think a lot of your response relates to why we engage very strongly in multilateral platforms, in multilateral diplomacy as well. And that's where we can create a very strong common voice, where we can engage also our development and also the trading partners. And these are reflected in all the documents that we have been talking about here, the Doha Program of Action, the AAAA, and the MC13, WTO's MC13 outcome that we have had last time. And we cannot also forget the FFD4, which has just come out this year, and the Sevilla commitment. And the Sevilla commitment actually recognized that the financing for, recognized the financing for development gap, which is around $4 trillion. And there is a commitment there also to bridge the gap by everybody working together, which includes the commitment from the development partners, the commitment from the trading partners, and on that. And these are the good ways to look at it. But as I was saying, how to walk the talk. And that's where the global partnership is key. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Last but not least, Dr. Mulares, your final remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. And I welcome and thank those who raised these questions, very important questions. I will not try to answer all of them, but just to take a few and start with the country that my neighbor, the ambassador, ended up with, the delegate of Bhutan. And with that also group UNIDO, both I would respond to what you said, first Bhutan, about a united view and the necessity to have that when it comes to graduation. I think from the limited experiences that we have with the development of smooth transition strategies in one form or another, it's of key importance that it's an all-of-society approach. And I think that cannot be stressed enough. When it comes to UNIDO, also a remark about smooth transition strategies and how regional integration can be integrated in those strategies. I wanted to mention that there is a guidance note on how to prepare smooth transition strategies. And I wouldn't be surprised if regional integration is part of it, but your point is very well taken, and thank you very much for that. You were probably here earlier this week when we had a session on smooth transition, and you've seen that the experiences are not that much just due to the fact that there haven't been many graduating countries so far. Then I would like to switch to two other remarks from Angola and Laos, and very welcome the remarks of the ambassador of Angola on appreciating IGRAD, but also saying it needs to be expanded. And I would say, thanks to the government of Qatar, we have been able to launch IGRAD shortly after the Doha Program of Action came out. It has been tested, it is working, and as you saw on the screen earlier in my presentation, many countries have already benefited from it, but very much agree also with the ambassador that we need to focus on more resources for that. Related to that, also want to come back to the statement from Laos saying that we need continued support upon graduation. I believe that we all very much agree with that, and wanted to mention those two service offering lines under IGRAD. One, supporting countries to take advantage while there are still LDCs and shortly after graduating of the LDC-specific support measures, but also giving support to countries if requested to help accessing non-LDC specific support. Lastly, I think I come back with what I started my presentation today, the importance of partnership. And just judging from my fellow members here on the podium, it's a word that came up quite a bit, and I think there's full agreement on that and of the key importance of partnership. And LDCs do not stand alone when it comes to graduating and graduated countries. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much, Doctor. Oh, that brings us to the end of our session. But before I make some concluding remarks, please let's give another round of applause to our speakers. Thank you very much. Excellencies and distinguished delegates, allow me again to extend my sincere appreciation to all speakers and participants for their constructive and insightful contributions. What has emerged clearly from our discussions is a shared recognition that graduation must be a sustainable, resilient, and incentive-based. We cannot expect countries to run faster while simultaneously removing the track beneath their feet. It is important that transition frameworks must protect development gains, address structural vulnerabilities, and mobilize financing and technology that endure beyond the moment of graduation. The future of development cooperation must not be anchored in static indicators, but in systems capable of withstanding dynamic global shocks. Our collective task now is not simply to refine the graduation process, it is to redefine it where necessary, so that no nation is punished for progress and no country is left alone after crossing an arbitrary threshold. I thank you all. I now declare the session closed. Thank you.